Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Ashafil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammadi wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. As I mentioned last week to the brothers who were here, that inshallah on Mondays we'll be having a hadith dars, a hadith lecture, and the book which we are going to be studying the various ahadith from is from this particular book here called Mishkaat Lesson. And this is a book which is studied in all the madarises in the world. So the madarises in Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, in the UK, America and so on, they all study this particular book. And it is a very, very good book because it's one of those books where all the hadiths, the main hadiths from Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmizi, Abu Dawood and so on, it's all in this particular book. So you don't have to carry around with your Abu Dawood and Tirmizi and Sahih Muslim and so on in your bag. You have this book and it's got all the hadiths there. So this is one of the qualities of this particular book, that it's got all the main hadiths from Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Sunnah Abu Dawood and so on and so forth. And another quality of this particular book is that it's one of those books that you find every single topic or hadiths regarding every single topic. If we were to take an example of, say, Sunnah Abu Dawood or Sunnah Tirmizi, they just concentrate on hadiths regarding Muslim sites. So how to do wudu, how to give your zakat, how to fast, how to pray salah. So under each section you will find hadiths. But this particular book here, it's got hadiths on everything. It's got hadiths about iman. It's got hadiths about azab-e-qabr, punishment of the grave. It's got hadiths about what are considered to be minor sins, what are considered to be major sins. There are hadiths about wuzu, about namaz, about zakat, about fasting, about Laylatul Qadr, about 15th of Shaban. Basically, there's hadiths on everything. Nikah, talaq, everything. Even there's also a section about, at the end as well, which talks about cleanliness of the heart, about you shouldn't have any hatred and malice and these kind of things for another Muslim brother. So basically, any section you want to think of, you'll find it in this particular book here. Now the texts which were sent around, what the topic which we're going to concentrate on, because I said there's so many sections here, but the topic which we are going to concentrate on initially on the Mondays from this particular book will be regarding Day of Judgment and the signs of Qiyamah. Now you may be thinking to yourself that Qiyamah is not going to happen. There's still hundreds and thousands of years left before Qiyamah comes. Now, to tell the truth, as mentioned in many hadiths, Qiyamah actually starts from the moment you leave this world. Qiyamah doesn't actually start when Dajjal comes and when Imam Mahdi comes and when Isa alayhi salam comes. As mentioned in many hadiths, the Qiyamah for an individual starts as soon as he leaves this world. Now again, some may be thinking that, we still got another 50 years left, another 40 years left, another 60 years left before we leave this world. No, it doesn't have to be like that. And again, I explained in last week's lesson as well, that death can come anytime. And we hear many stories of youngsters, guys who are in their mid-20s, they're having heart attacks and they're dying. So a person can pass away whenever. He doesn't have to wait until he's 50 and 60 and then he'll pass away. But people can pass away in their 20s, people can pass away in their teens, people can pass away in their 30s and in their 40s. So the whole idea of studying this particular section is to actually prepare ourselves for the hereafter. Don't have this false notion that we're going to be here for many years, because this is something which the people of Makkah thought. This is something which the people of Nuh alayhi salam thought. This was something which the people of Lut alayhi salam thought, that we're going to be here for many years, nothing's going to happen to us. This is what Fir'aun thought as well. But then what happened? azab and punishment came and he wiped them all away. So exactly here for us as well, that never ever get into this false notion that we're going to be here for many, many years. Death can occur anytime. Qiyamah might come anytime. So the main thing is that we need to prepare ourselves for the hereafter. And the best way to prepare ourselves is by doing our a'mals, by doing good deeds, by doing good actions. If we live a life in such a way that the namaz which we prayed, if we think of it to be our last namaz, if we think of this gathering to be our last gathering, then I'm sure that we'll be doing a lot of good amals and good actions. So this is how we should live our life in this world, not to think about we're going to be here for many, many years, not to think that we're going to be here for many, many weeks or days. Death may come anytime, and the thing which is going to help us in the hereafter is going to be our amals and our actions. As mentioned in the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that when a person passes away, three things go to his graves. That three things go to him to bury him. The three things are his a'mals, number two are his family, and number three are his wealth. Now wealth meaning in terms of his slaves, his slave girls, gulams, so on, they will go to bury him. Then the hadith goes on to say that one remains and two return. So his family will bury him and they'll return. His gulams and slave girls, they will bury him and they'll return. But there's only one thing which will remain with that person, and that is وَبَقِيَ عَمَلُ, that will be his actions and deeds. So remember, in the hereafter, it's just like we are going to be by ourselves, and it's only our a'mals which is going to help us. So remember, even like helping and being part of the markaz and the center, that in itself is like good deeds which we are presenting for the hereafter. As Zamisa mentioned yesterday, that having our homes nicely furnished and decorated, that's not going to help us in the hereafter. But what's going to help us in the hereafter will be our a'mals, our actions, our connection with the homes and with the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These things will surely help us in the hereafter. Now going back to the chapter which is in front of us, there are three types of signs. The commentators of the hadith, they have mentioned that there are three types of signs of Day of Judgment and Qiyamah. The first are those signs which have already happened. And examples of those signs which have already happened, such as the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the bi'sat of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, thereafter the demise and the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All these are signs of Qiyamah, and they've already happened. Then the second types of signs are those signs which are going to happen in the future, which, as mentioned in the hadith, they are known as the big signs of Day of Judgment. And what I mean by the major or the big signs of Day of Judgment is that when these things happen, then you know that Qiyamah and Day of Judgment is very, very soon. Such as we will look at in the hadith later, the coming of the Dajjal, the dissension of Sayyiduna Isa alayhi salam, Imam Mahdi, and so on and so forth. Then you have other signs which we call the minor signs of Day of Judgment. Things which will happen before the coming of the major signs of Day of Judgment. And the hadiths which we're going to study or look at now, we will see that many of the minor signs which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has prophesied 1400 years ago are being found when we look in our community. When we look in our society, we can see that every single one of these minor signs are being found. Now this is then telling us two things. It should tell us two things. Number one, first and foremost, it should tell us the tasdeeq and the verification of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam over 1400 years ago was able to predict these minor signs. And number two, the second thing which we should raise our alarm bells in our mind is that Qiyamah and Day of Judgment is very, very soon. Now we'll just look at some of the hadiths and then you'll understand these minor signs which are Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam predicted, which are being found in our community, in our society. Now the first hadith, which can be found in Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, narrated by Hazrat Anas radhiyallahu anhu, that he once said, Sami'tu Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam yaqul, that I heard Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, Inna min ashrati sa'ati ay yurfa al-ilm wa yukthar al-jahl. that one of the signs of Day of Judgment will be that knowledge will be uplifted. Knowledge will be taken away, or knowledge will be uplifted. Now, what do you mean by knowledge being taken away? Number one, it could mean that the pious ulamas of the past, they will go away. So you won't see any top quality, any muttaqi or pious alim or scholar around. The ones who were around, they've left this world. And what you now have, as the next part of the hadith says, وَيُكْثَرُ الْجَهَلِ, there will be jahalat, increase of jahalat. Now, increase of jahalat could be that people will be just ignorant. They don't want to know about Islam. They don't want to know about the Sharia. If you want to invite people to dars or lectures, they'll say, oh no, that's not for me. That's for, pious people. I'm not pious, and so on. So the reason why is because there's so much jahalat and ignorance around. Because if you're not going to come to lectures or learn about your deen, then how are you supposed to learn about your deen and your religion? So there will be an increase in jahalat. And the increase of jahalat, and we're seeing some classic examples nowadays of increase of jahalat, where people who are not scholars, people who are not alims, but they will then pretend to be alims and scholars. They in fact proper jahil. They don't know anything about the deen. They don't know anything about the religion. But then what will happen is that because they've got some fame or they got some contacts with, say, television companies, so they go into the television, they'll give a few fatwas and a few rulings here and there and cause more ikhtilaf and disunity amongst the Muslims. So this is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam predicted, that there will be so much increase of jahalat and ignorance that people will be claiming to be scholars, people will be claiming to be prophets, people will be claiming to be this and that. And because there is so much jahalat, ignorance, that the people, they will actually believe these people. The awam will then believe in that person. Will think, yeah, he's a prophet, he's the final Messiah, and they will start believing in him. Or that he is Imam Mahdi, they will start believing in him. So this is something which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has predicted. And when we look around, just look around ourselves. Look at the knowledge, which is the lack of knowledge which is there, and also number two, the increase of jahalat and ignorance which is prevalent. And I did touch on this yesterday as well, when you talk to people about tasawwuf and tazkiyah, that when you talk to people about tasawwuf and zikr and so on, then people say it's a bid'ah. And I explain one of the reasons why they say it's a bid'ah is because they don't even have any knowledge regarding it. And they say, oh, it's just a bid'ah and so on, without actually having the tawfiq to actually do some kind of mutala or some kind of like homework or some kind of like research on the topic. They just constantly say it's a bid'ah and this is something which is wrong. So this is down to people's ignorance and jahala. The next thing which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has mentioned, another minor signs of Day of Judgment, will be وَيُكْثَرُ zina, that there will be an increase of zina and adultery. That adultery and fornication will be committed left, right and center. Now, this hadith is not talking just about non-Muslims, it's talking about Muslims. That within Muslim families, within Muslim people, within people who have got Muslim names, people who may even have a beard, they will be committing zina, they will be committing adultery. And I touched on this topic before as well, that before we used to think that Muslim husbands cheating on their wives or wives cheating on their husband was something like you see in dramas or in films or in soaps and EastEnders and so on. But now you'll be shocked that these things are happening in Muslim families. You'll hear stories of wives cheating on their husbands, husbands cheating on their wives. You'll hear stories, may Allah forbid, that wives running away with their brother-in-laws. So these things are happening. And as I said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that this is one of the signs of Day of Judgment, وَيُكْثَرُ zina, that zina will be in the increase. And you'll get, and what I mean by zina here, obviously it means the severest act of zina, i.e. the actual adultery, fornication, the penetration and so on, but also other things related to zina as well also found, in terms of like flirting with women. That's also very common as well. You just have to go to Facebook or just have to go to these kind of Muslim dating sites. Na'uzubillah, they've got the word Muslim dating site. How can dating be allowed in Islam? But what they've done is that they've used the word Muslim or Islamic dating site, and people thinking, oh, this is lawful and permissible. Like I gave the example yesterday, that a time will come when haram things will be made lawful. How? Not because of the people will start selling alcohol, or people will start doing gambling. But what will happen is that people will just give fancy names, and people will legitimize it and make it lawful. So all these Muslim dating sites, never on earth it can be lawful or halal. So we see people flirting with girls. All these things are in the increase. So again, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has predicted that. Not just a few years ago, he predicted it 1500 years ago, and we're seeing all that happening within our own eyes. The next thing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, a sign of day of judgment, will be وَيُكْثَرَ شُرْبُ الْخَمَرِ, that alcohol will be drunk abundantly. So people will be drinking alcohol. Now again, we're not talking about non-Muslims drinking alcohol. We're talking about Muslims drinking alcohol. Muslims, people who got Muslim names, women, sisters who have got Muslimah names, who's got names such as Aisha, like the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, beautiful names such as Fatima, like the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they will be drinking alcohol. Or just talking to a sister just recently, exact same thing as well, drinking alcohol. So these things are happening within Muslims, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam predicted that this is all minor signs of day of judgment. And the next thing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned was وَيَقِلَّ الرِّجَالِ وَيَكْثُرَ النِّسَاءِ حَتَّى يَكُونَ لِخَمْسِينَ إِمْرَأَةً الْقَيِّمُ الْوَاحِدِ, that the population of men will be at a decrease, that there will be more women than men. Last thing Rasulullah mentioned here, that a time will come, again this is one of the minor signs of day of judgment, that there will be more women than men. The population of men will decrease, and there will be so many women. And again, when you look at the census, I think it's called, of every country, you will find that there are more women than men. Even if you just look at Wikipedia and so on, if you look at the history of every single country and their population, you will find more or less in every single country there are more women than men. It's a fact. Even in England, even in Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, whether you go to Australia, whether you go to Western countries or third world countries, you will find there are more women than men. Again, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has predicted that there will be more women than men, to the extent, the last part of the hadith says, حَتَّى يَكُونَ لِخَمْسِينَ إِمْرَأَةً الْقَيِّمُ الْوَاحِدِ, that for every 50 women there will be one man. If you're looking at a ratio, that every man, the ratio would be uske muqable mein there will be 50 women. Now what we mean by 50 women here, it doesn't mean that a man will get married to 50 women, but what you're trying to say is, number one, in terms of ratio, or number two, the second meaning could be, which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has predicted, that one man would have to look after 50 women. That in one man's zimmedari or responsibility, there would be 50 women. And maybe thinking that, oh, how can that be possible, and so on, one man looking after 50 women? You just have to look at some brothers who come from Bangladesh and Pakistan to this country, and if you ask them that, why do you have 2 jobs for? Why do you have 3 jobs for? So they tell you that, oh, I have to support my wife, she's back home, I have to support my daughters, I have to support my khala, I have to support my chachi, I have to support this, I have to support, Poopi, everyone. And if you were to add them all up, my cousin, sisters and so on, it easily adds up to 50. So again, this is something which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam predicted, that a time will come that one man, there was a time before that only a man would just be looking after his parents or his mother and his wife, and that's it. But now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has predicted, again over 1400 years ago, that a time would come where one man would be looking after 50 women. And we see that when we speak to some brothers who come from Bangladesh, who come from Pakistan, and they got 2-3 jobs, that they are looking after 50 women, they are zimmedar and responsible 50 women, and this is again minus signs of day of judgment. Next hadith very quickly, which can be found in Sahih al-Bukhari, narrated by Sayyidina Abu Hurairah anhu. Now in this hadith, again one of the Sahabas, they asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Mata sa'a, when is day of judgment? Now this is the reply Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave. He said, Iza duyyi'atil amanatu fantazili sa'a, which means that when a time comes when amanat, trust, is not valued, or trust is not destroyed, or when amanat is not given that much importance, then wait for Day of Judgment. Okay, now from this part of the hadith we can derive that anything which is like amanat, the amanat could be anything, like somebody gave you some money to look after £1,000. And we'll hear stories, then you've gone somewhere, you've gone for a holiday, when you come back and you ask him, where's my £1,000? He goes, oh, what £1,000? I haven't heard of, I've ever met you before. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that when amanat starts getting abused, when people don't respect amanat and trust, then you'll have to wait for Qiyamah. Now, the next part of the hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then explained that what do you mean by wasting or amanat being abused? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then explained, إِذَا وُسِّدَ الْأَمْرُ إِلَى غَيْرِ أَهْلِهِ فَانْتَظِرِ السَّاعَةِ, that when amanat is given to someone who is not worthy of it, then wait for Day of Judgment. Okay, so it could be anything, because amanat literally means responsibility. So it could be, say for example, someone who's not supposed to be an imam, but he is given the responsibility of being the imam. Just say someone who's not practicing, who doesn't have the sunnah beard, who does bad things and unlawful things, smokes, takes drugs and so on, and he's being the imam. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that when bad people are given high responsibilities, people who are not deserving are given like high post and high maqams, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, "Fantaziri sa'a," wait for Day of Judgment, wait for Qiyamah. So what we can gather from the second hadith here, again another minor sign of Day of Judgment, is that when people who are not supposed to be given that particular responsibility, and I said it could be any responsibility, it could be imamat responsibility, it could be someone who's not actually worthy of teaching hadith or anything. If someone who's not worthy of that and he is given that responsibility, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has told us to wait for Day of Judgment and Day of Qiyamah. And again, when you look around our society, we see many examples of that. People are made ministers, are made like counselors, are made like presidents, and when you look at their history, they've done bad things, they've done evil things, but people are now respecting them and they've become the imams and the leaders of our community. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has predicted that when these things start happening, then Day of Qiyamah and Day of Judgment will come. May Allah give us the tawfiq to save ourselves from these minor signs of Day of Judgment, and may Allah give us the tawfiq to prepare ourselves for Qiyamah, Day of Judgment and the hereafter. Wa akhiru da'wan alhamdulillah.